Hello, Aoife. Welcome to Disabled and Proud. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and giving up time to be on the podcast today. I'm I always say this, but I'm really genuinely looking forward to this chat because I've never had one of these podcasts where I haven't learned something. And
Yeah,
considering disability is so widespread and it's so individual, I learn all the time and I can't wait to learn something new today. So here we are.
here we are. That's it. You are right, though. It's such a wide spectrum, isn't it, between, invisible and visible disabilities.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of it's mad because we judge books by covers so regularly. I myself do it very easily in like
Mhm.
everyday life. Oh, I'm sure they'll be fine to do that. I'm sure they'll be fine to do this or whatever. And
Yeah.
you just don't know what is going on for other people, really, do you? And it just teaches you, I think, living with conditions, that we both live with. I think teaches you to be more kind, doesn't it, and to be more understanding.
Yeah, massively more understanding actually, because I think what's so interesting about disability, it isn't see like everybody seems to think it's this massive monolith, and actually it's not. Like disability is very much an umbrella term that houses so many different things, so many different spectrums. And you're right, when it comes to especially like visible versus invisible disabilities, what we can't see, we don't know. And I think sometimes human nature, because you can't see it, you don't understand it. And it's not until someone has to explain to you exactly why that you go back and you're like, oh, okay, that makes a bit more sense. And
Yeah.
oh, okay, like I can see in like my mind how that doesn't work, but I don't necessarily see it physically.
Absolutely, totally. Yeah, yeah. No, it definitely does. And I feel like it's a double-edged sword sometimes with having something invisible,
Mm-hmm.
because most people will just assume, again, that judge book by cover, theory, that you're fine, and they
Yeah.
don't kind of because it's unseen. It's very, very hard, I think. And look, I don't blame anyone for that because that's just like human nature, isn't it? It's very hard for someone to
Yeah.
understand something that they can't see. So so yeah, I do find that a double-edged sword because sometimes I like the fact that it's quite hidden and no one would ever know, and that works in my favour at times.
Yeah.
And then other times I find it really hard to get people to like fully understand exactly what I'm going through. So
Yeah. This is actually the most seamless transition ever because I like to ask everybody before we start, how do you refer to your disability?
again, because mine's invisible, it's not something that necessarily needs to be brought up or does get brought up straight away. I think if it was something more, yeah, visible, I think
Mm-hmm.
somebody might ask me about it before I will bring it up, maybe, or maybe
Yeah.
I would naturally feel like it's the elephant in the room and have to say something to address it. So
Yeah.
because mine is quite invisible, it doesn't come up in conversation with you know sort of strangers half as
Mm-hmm.
quick as maybe it would with people that know me. But I am very, very open with talking about it, and I do refer
Yeah.
to it as a disability. It's bladder failure effectively. So
Mm-hmm.
mine's a disability of an organ, and that's sort of how I would describe it really. And I would say it in very layman's terms, I just can't pee. And everything else works, but I just can't pee. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't go in with any kind of big medical, diagnoses to people that sort of didn't understand. If I was explaining it to somebody, I'd say, it's an invisible disability and I can't
Mm-hmm.
pee. And I think stretching and challenging those realms around having a disability doesn't mean you're not enabled.
Yeah.
The fact that my bladder doesn't work and it disables me, well, actually, it also enables me to do so much more with my life because I do feel like I'm pushing boundaries all the time,
Yeah.
especially with what I'm trying to do online and changing within the NHS. And, I'm fighting a lot at the minute with a cause to do with chronic health and bladder condition,
Mm-hmm.
um, that just sort of isn't out there enough. So I feel like I wouldn't do that if I didn't have a disability. So, with
Yeah.
my bladder. So actually, it's enabled me to do so much more with my life than maybe I would have if I didn't have it.
Yeah. And so from my research that I have done, oh, I feel really like clever when I say that. I believe I'm right in saying that you have Fowler's syndrome. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yes, that's right. Fowler's syndrome.
And I obviously had never heard of this before because, funnily enough, not every single disabled person knows every single disability under the sun. That's also a massive lie that people
Yeah.
love to throw out there. Oh, like just because you have a hand missing must mean, you know, someone with spina bifida. Well, it's not really how it works. Like, we're not all put into one big club. But I'd love to talk to you about this a bit more, because I have a very, very basic understanding. And my basic understanding is exactly what you said, is that you can't pee. So
Yeah.
I'm going to pass it over to you, because I don't want to look like I don't know anything, because I want to learn. So please talk to me all about Fowler syndrome.
Okie doke. Well, Fowler syndrome is a chronic retention-based illness. So my body retains the fluid in my bladder rather than letting it go. So at the age of 16, I stopped being able to wee. I literally sat on the toilet and wee wouldn't come out. So it was as bizarre and as on hard hitting and sort of quick onset, you know, as that. It just happened.
Yeah.
Usually get Fowlers secondary to something else. So everyone has a different background really with Fowlers. You know, it happens because of something else that's gone wrong with your body, or an illness subsequent, previous to Fowlers, you then develop Fowlers. Yeah. And the condition is a woman-only condition. It only really affects women.
Interesting.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I had glandular fever and shingles at 16. So I wasn't an ill child ever. I'd gone through most of my life with just coughs and colds, you know, small things like that. And then I ended up developing glandular fever and shingles in hospital at 16. The shingles came up around my groin area. So they do think that the Fowler syndrome has stemmed from shingles attacking your nerves, and my shingles are quite close to sort of my bladder, again, groin area. So they do think that that's sort of where my Fowlers has come from. And I was catheterized there and then, like urethral, to just drain the contents of my bladder. I was told that once the shingles are gone, that, you know, the nerve damage, again, shingles attacking nerves, nerve damage is probably why I wasn't weeing. The hospital at the time didn't even know about Fowlers, neither did I. Obviously, this was very, you know, at the beginning. So they were just treating it as sort of, you know, temporary nerve damage, and that wee again eventually. But I was taught to ISC, so put catheters up myself. So you use a little mirror and then a small catheter, and when you go to the toilet, you kind of find your urethra, which is your wee hole, and you just pop it up and then wee. But because my bladder was so damaged and my urethral muscles were, my urethra was really tight, and that's a really big symptom of Fowlers, is a real tightening of the urethral muscles. So I was trying to put these catheters up, they were getting stuck, and, you know, it was awful at the beginning, and they couldn't understand why. The hospital I was in, I mean, we're going back 15 years now, they were sort of saying, well, this shouldn't be happening, you should just be able to catheterize really easily. Like, I don't get it. So my mom, she was a midwife at that hospital, and she'd done lots of research, like worrying about me, sort of Googling and looking up things. And she said, Aoife, you know, I think you might have this thing called Fowler syndrome. So we looked at trying to get some testing, and we spoke to my consultant and arranged to go up to London. They've got a private, well, it was private at the time, but I think it's NHS now, a clinic up in London where you can go and have all the Fowlers testing done and chat to medics and professors and everyone who's worked with Claire Fowler, Professor Claire Fowler, who founded Fowlers. So it's kind of stemming, it's her baby, and then she's passed it on to other professors, and they've kept the clinic going. So we went up there, and sure enough, I had Fowler syndrome, and quite a strong variation of it as well. They used all my recordings of my testings. They asked could they keep them, because they hadn't seen at the time a strength of Fowlers like mine in such a young girl.
Wow.
Yeah.
And also at 16, which is like, it's such a formative and awkward age for anything like to happen as a teenager. It must have been like, I can only imagine what that must have been like, especially around your bladder area, because I think as humans and as people, we can get quite shy when we talk about toileting.
Yes.
And it's something that actually we kind of need to talk about a bit more, so that we can understand when there is an issue. Like my best friend and my mum laugh at me because I went through a phase of texting them every time I did a poo. And they were like, why are you telling me? And I was like, look, if something happened, at least I've got a track record of like when I last went. So like, I know that it's you guys that are getting it, but like I'm doing this for myself.
I love that though. That's brilliant. Like normalizing again, like it's crazy because obviously I run an online platform, B is for Bladder. It's a community for those that struggle with bladder illness in particular. But we see so much more out there for bowel now. Yes, it's still probably not spoken about as much as it needs to be, but they always say there's like a taboo around poo. And I'm like, I see so many people online talking about their colostomy bags and bowel, but I rarely see, or not as many, talk about bladder. And it's crazy. It's like there's a bigger taboo around wee than there is poo these days. I don't get it. So I'm here to break all that with what I'm doing. I'm trying to, like, you know, change the narrative, and let's talk about our toilet habits, poo or wee, either way. Let's keep it in the conversation. It's important.
And I also think as women particularly, because when we need to go, we need to go. We don't have that ability, because it's obviously like guys have a bit different, but with females particularly, like it's such a difficult like area to navigate, because I've been in so many situations where I've been like, oh my gosh, if I don't go now, I'm going to wee myself. Like it's going to happen, and like it's going to happen in front of a load of people, and I need to run. And the amount of times that I've had to like sprint to a toilet is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that we don't have these conversations sometimes is absolutely wild.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. It's crazy. And also I think that, like, with me sort of I've got a suprapubic catheter now, so it comes out of my stomach. There's a indwelling catheter that stays there all the time, so I don't have to catheterize urethral, because that's where the issue lies, is my urethral muscles too tight. And I have like leaks often. So like I'll be at work, I'm a primary school teacher, and I'll be at work and I'll just have like a major leak in the classroom, and it's like, oh. So I've tried to really normalize it on that level with kids as well. Sort of say, oh, Miss Madden's bladder's leaked, and she's just got to go and change her tights, you know. Because I think that, again, if we kind of normalize it from a child level, or, you know, from that age, if we start normalizing that chat, then they're going to grow up, aren't they, you know, as adults who think, you know what, not everyone's the same, and that's okay.
Yes, very much this. I always think that when we start to talk about disability, like when I look back when I was at school, there was absolutely no conversation around disability. There was no conversation about anything that was out of the ordinary. It was men and men, women are women. Women have blonde hair and blue eyes and work in the kitchen, and men do like some form of banking job. Now, obviously, times have changed an awful lot since then, and they have changed, you know, so drastically. But actually, like, disability was never mentioned. And I was a disabled child. Like, I was born with my disability. So someone should have been like, just to let you know, like, you are different and that's okay, but you're still perfect, you're still valid. But that conversation was never had. So I actually 110% agree with you. And I think it's so fab as well that, you know, you're making it normal for your students, because I don't know what my life would have been like had I had a disabled teacher, because I never saw that. So I didn't really know what was, you know, able for me. And it's so good that you're just being so upfront and so honest, because I think the next generation need that. And how good is that? Like how perfect is that to be able to make other people realize that if they're just a little bit different, then it's completely fine, because we're all actually freaks.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, my niece Caitlin, she's hilarious, because she loves, obviously, I'm close with her, so she'd come into the bathroom with me, let's say at my house or whatever, and I'm like, right, I'm going to go for a wee now. She thinks it's like an absolute superpower. She's like, can I watch? Because obviously I'm just getting a tube out and standing there. I don't need to sit on the loo. So yeah, and normalising on that level is just so important. We at B is to Bladder, on my online community, we made like a series of Barbie dolls with suprapubic catheters.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, because I was like, imagine having a toy as a child that, you know, had, like you were saying, you were born with a disability. So imagine having a toy that represented you.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible.
Yeah. I think that's so brilliant, because I think, you know, Lego have just brought out their limb difference character. I think it's Autumn. I think that's the name. I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah,
Someone
I saw
fight me. I'm like, I was walking down Fifth Avenue in New York. Oh, listen to me, I sound like such a globetrotter walking down Fifth Avenue in New York. And I was walking by, like, I wasn't going into the Lego store, but you walk past the Lego store, and like this massive giant character was there with a limb difference, and I burst out crying. And this was only like a month ago, and I was literally there, and I was like, oh my goodness. And this woman they were queuing for something, God knows what, and this woman was like, are you okay? And I was like, clearly not. But it was the first time I'd ever seen a toy that looked like me.
Yeah.
And like, how am I? And like, you know, I'm not a child. Like, I don't need toys in my life anymore. well, you know, depends what type of toilet it is, but you know. But I don't need that. But imagine small version of me, like little Brooke, would have loved to have seen that, and would have loved to have seen that she was on Fifth Avenue and that representation. So I think that that's like the most magical thing that you can do.
Oh my gosh, 100%, definitely. I really, really hope that, you know, that carries on as well, because I think it's great that companies like Lego are jumping into that. But like a lot of stuff I see online, there's a woman that makes bears, and she'll like do like a teddy bear with a colostomy bag, or a teddy bear with catheters. She does them now.
Yeah.
A teddy bear with, you know, lines in for children who are having sort of treatment IV often, and a line in the teddy bear. And I think that that's great, but like we want mainstream companies like Lego, which is brilliant, to jump on, because we don't want to think we've got to go to a special woman to have our special toy made.
Yeah,
Do you know?
exactly that. Exactly that.
You're put into a box again, aren't you? Then, rather than it being sort of
Normalized.
Normalized, yeah, yeah.
So, for you at 16, what was that experience like to suddenly be landed with the disability? Because as I said, like it's such a formative age, it's an awkward age for anyone. Like you genuinely couldn't pay me enough money to be a teenager again.
No.
And then to be landed with a disability that is gonna, you know, ultimately change your life. And I don't want that to sound dramatic, but I'm pretty sure it has changed your life. I mean, feel free to absolutely correct me if it hasn't. But what was that like for you?
Yeah, I think again you sort of struck on the age there. It was a really scary age in life anyway. Was, you know, we were just finishing our GCSEs, and I had a place to do my A levels, and like at the same school, and everyone sort of just wanted to do what their mates were doing, and I was excited to sort of go with all the girls to sixth form, and all of that was going on. And then that summer I ended up in hospital, so I did go back to college and do my first year of my A levels. And then after that, things became so difficult with catheters, and we were really not getting it right. Again, my local hospital wasn't sort of very up to date on Fowler syndrome, even when I had the diagnosis. It took me a year to get the diagnosis, and it was a lot of fighting. And my mum and I were doing a lot of research, and up and down to London to this clinic, and, you know, begging the consultant here in Birmingham, where I live, to refer us up. He was really old school and sort of said Fowlers is quite a newfound thing, because I think it's in the last 40 years or so. It's a new disease, if you like. If you had it 40 years ago, people just would have said you were a hysterical woman, you need to calm down, you know, you go and take some deep breaths and you'll probably wee eventually. It's just that you're stressed. That's how it would have been seen like 40 years ago. And, you know, for me, yes, okay, it was a stressful time. Like I had shingles you know, at that time, and I was in hospital, and all the rest of it would have caused some amount of stress. But even a year later, I was still not weeing. So clearly there's something's like really not right. So my consultant at the time in Birmingham was really, you know, anti-Fowlers. He didn't really want to send me up to the clinic, and it just took a lot of fighting. And I remember being 16 and thinking, this, like, all my mates are just fighting to let their mums and dads like allow them to go to the park on a Saturday or whatever. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? They were fighting such trivial things, or they wanted the newest dress in Topshop, and they were begging their mum for 40 quid and had to do all the chores around the house or whatever it was. Whereas I was there like fighting with doctors to try and be heard, and, you know, changing my whole future, because I did 1 year of sixth form and things got so difficult with trying to manage the condition and 5 days to school still, sixth form. I just couldn't do it. I took a year out after that then. But I remember feeling like at that time, oh my gosh, my whole life is over. Like my whole plan, I wanted to be a primary school teacher at the time as well. So I was thinking of my whole plan to be a teacher, like it's just never going to happen. I'll never get to university. And I feel like since then it's been fight the whole way through. You know, still fight to get a place at uni, because I remember in my interview they were saying you can't really teach in a classroom with this if you need to go to the toilet all the time. You know, what if you have a leak in front of the kids? I said, I'll just tell them about the leak. It's fine. You know, but it seemed like there was a lot of obstacles that I had to overcome the whole way through. So being 16, I think, and having this in one way, because if I had it from birth, again, not comparing and saying one's easier or one's harder, but if I had it from birth, I feel like maybe I would have kind of learned my coping mechanisms from the start.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I wouldn't have had to shift and adapt as
Yeah.
big as I did as having it at 16. And again, that being quite a tender age. I'm 30 now, and I look back and I just think, God, I'm so much more sure of who I am now and what I'm about, what I want to do and achieve, right? At 16, I didn't really have a clue. And then I was still navigating me and finding out who I was, but also trying to navigate this new world of chronic illness and ill health. And yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, it's a lot at any age, but it's like, particularly 16, like you're an awkward teenager. Like, show me anybody at 16 who really knows themselves, who like 10 years later then goes, oh yeah, I'm the same person who I was at 16. Like, show me that person and I'll show you a liar.
Yeah, totally.
And I think it's really interesting what you said about how at uni they flagged up that this would be a really difficult thing for you to do, to then go on to teach children. And, we talk about ableism a lot, but that is a prime example of exactly what ableism is. And I was wondering how, obviously, like, you're a primary school teacher now, you have your online platform, but actually, how has your disability impacted your career, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah. Again, I felt like I was behind everyone else a little bit. I went to uni later than my friends did.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's path's different, isn't it? And as you get older, you kind of like, you think, well, actually, like, I'm on my own path. I've got to stop comparing my path to everyone else's. But even that's hard in your 30s. Like, some of your mates are getting married, having babies. Maybe you're not doing that, or some of them are traveling Australia or wherever, and you're thinking, go and do that. Everyone's path is different. So it's really hard to not compare. I get that. But trying to compare sort of at a younger age, or trying not to compare at a younger age even, what I found quite difficult, because I felt like I was wanted to be doing it when all the kids were doing it. So uni came a little bit later, a couple of years later than my friends went. And then when I got there, a few sort of like the deans of the university, 2 or 3 of them actually said to me in a meeting when we had our first teaching practice, so our first placement in a school, I really don't know whether you really need to get this hard thing. I don't know whether this is for you, because I really don't know how you're going to cope. How are you going to come if you because I needed hospital quite regularly at the time as well. And even now I have a GA, so a general anaesthetic, every 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So I've had 130 something GAs at the age of 30. Yeah.
Oh my God.
You have a tally on the fridge door.
Oh my goodness.
I have surgeries all the time. Hospital is my second home. I'm always in and out of A&E, or the outpatients too, where all the urology specialists are, appointments and things. So he just sort of said, and he was right in one way, but the way he executed it was completely wrong.
Yeah.
Sort of said that because you attend hospital so regularly, how are you meant to be a full-time primary school teacher? Like, those kids need you all the time. That really felt quite personal, and I wanted to prove him wrong, of course. Then I was like, I'm definitely going to do this. And I remember I said, look, I want to have another meeting about this, and is it all right if my mum comes, because she lives with my condition with me at the time. And I said, she's also a nurse background, so she can maybe just inform you of how autonomous I am with my condition now, and how I can do so much with it myself. Like, I go away on weekends away and I manage it fine. There's so many examples in everyday life where I manage it fine, so I can't see how this would be any different. So he said, no, you can't have your mum with you on the meeting, right? So I said, okay, can I have my nurse with me, please? My district nurse, because she might be able to inform you a bit better of how my condition translates into everyday life or whatever. So we brought my mom, because she was my nurse. She's a nurse, right?
Oh my God, I love this so much.
It's the best story. So we attended the meeting. We arranged a second meeting to sort of fight for the fact that I wanted to do my teaching practice and really succeed at a degree. And we knocked on his door and he said, oh, hi, Aoife, this is your district nurse and whatever. I said, well, actually, this is my mom. She's my living district nurse. She lives at home with me. So, and he was like, oh, because he couldn't say no then, because she'd come on a nurse capacity, but she was my mom. So she also managed to help me really fight my case there, which was great. And to be honest, like, in my career now that I'm 8 years teaching now, I've managed full time until this year, and because I'm awaiting a urostomy surgery to remove my bladder completely and give me a stoma bag, and I'm passing lots of stones and debris. I've had a bit of another change in my condition, if you like, which has meant that I've had to reduce my hours at work. But until now, I've managed full time, and most of my employers, my head teachers, have been brilliant. You know, they've made adaptations where needed. So my classroom was nearer to the toilet. My last classroom was, and any routine regular surgeries, we'd arrange cover for that day. And I think I'm very aware of my condition at work, as in if I've got a surgery on a Tuesday, I'm usually back in work by the Thursday. So I'll work Monday, I'll work Thursday, Friday, I'll have an operation on the Tuesday, recover on the Wednesday, and I go back into work by Thursday, because I'm very adamant to not let this affect. I don't want them to give them any reason to think Aoife can't do a job, you know, because when you're a primary school teacher in particular, those 30 babies need you. They're your kids. You see them sometimes more than their parents see them at home. You know, you get called mom all the time instead of miss. Like, you know, you're everything to those 30 kids. And I take that responsibility really, really, you know, I hold it in high regard, you know. So, yeah, I do try. And a lot of these surgeries that I'm talking about are quite small. The procedures for a GA, effectively. You know, if it was a big surgery, I probably would need more time to recover. For those ones, because I'm used to them, they're regular, they happen every 6 weeks. It's just a change of catheter, and they do like a little bladder MOT, and do a few other bits sometimes, but nothing that a day in bed the day after wouldn't cure. Do you know? It's just kind of, and I really am very mindful. I might have very low impact days on the Thursday and Friday when I go back to work, like we wouldn't be doing PE, running around, you know, it would still be quite chilled in the classroom with the kids. But at least I've gone back into work, and I've not, you know, I've really shown to them that I'm not here to mess anyone around. Do you know what I mean? That I want to get up and get back on and carry on. So they respect that of me as well, because they know that I'm not taking the mick or anything. Do you know, that I really do want to get in, and it's really important to me to still live a near normal life with all of this going on. So, I mean, it has impacted my career to some degree, because I've had to have very difficult conversations with people I work with at times. You know, about my disability and how it affects every day. And again, with it being invisible, it's hard for them to sort of see it and understand it. But yeah, I mean, I've tried to really fight to overcome all of that the whole way through.
And I think that's what you said about, you know, because when you said that you go back in, I'm like, oh my God, she goes back in after surgery. Like, this girl's a fucking nutter. Then when you explain it a bit more, that actually, you know, it's not like a super intense surgery. It's not like you're getting your chest cranked. That's not what we're talking about here. That makes sense. And it completely makes sense. And particularly when you've had your disability used against you for one reason or another, regardless of what it has been because of, there is an element of you that almost you're out to prove that you can regardless. And it's almost like a massive fingers up, isn't it? Like, actually, like, you made the worst decision of your life. You judged me on something that you should never have judged me on. But here we are, and I'm proving a point. And the reason I bring this up is because I had this experience a couple of weeks ago. And I had this whole thing, and like, if you know me and if you listen to this podcast regularly, you know that I love CrossFit. And I had a bit of a run-in with one of the people at my gym, and they judged me based on what they thought I could and couldn't do, which, you know, wrong in their eyes. They'd never seen me work out before. But then a few weeks later, I was still like, I need to prove my point here. And to the point where I pushed myself super, super hard in a workout to ensure that I came first out of everybody in the gym. And I was like, haha, I'm doing this on purpose. Also, because, you know, I'm really good at CrossFit. Side note, I'm actually really not that good at CrossFit. I just really like pushing myself.
CrossFit queen.
Yeah. So I love that it gives you that motivation as well, because there is something to be said in turning like pain into fuel. And a lot of people are very, very against that. And I completely understand why, because, you know, some kind of pains are too painful to turn into fuel. But then at the same time, there are some types of pain that, you know, when someone judges you and you know that you can do it. This is the big thing. If you know that you can do something better, or you can do it, and someone believes that you can't, absolutely turn that pain into fuel and push yourself to prove the point that you can do it. Because not only are you benefiting yourself and proving to yourself that you can do it, but it also sets a precedent for other disabled people, so that we're not judging every single book by its cover, but actually disabled people are a lot more capable than society believes we are. And that's like the whole world over. That's not just like for disability, whatever. So I love that for you. And I love that I love the fact that you took your mum. I think that's hilarious. Like I think that's so perfect, because there's no way that you can argue with that. And particularly with your mum having a nursing background, she's going to be the person that fights for you the best. And that is just like, it's just so serendipitous, isn't it? Like it's perfect.
It just worked out perfectly. I just think that bit there about pain and fuel, it's mad because yeah, okay, I have these like routine surgeries, right? Every 6 weeks. They're usually on a Monday or a Tuesday. I'll go in, I might have one day in bed after. I mean, I am having just a whiff of the GA for those, like even though they are deemed surgeries, they're done in theatre and I am put to sleep. They're very small in comparison to some of I've had large, quite big restorative surgeries done to try and rectify the damage that Fowlers has done in the past. And I've needed much more time off than that. So I'm not here to suggest to anyone to have a surgery and hop back into work 2 days later. That's something that works for me because I know it's small, it's routine, I'm used to it. My surgeon and I've known him a long time now. I know exactly what they've done when I'm under there. You know, it's very small and it's very doable for me. But there are times where that pain I haven't been able to turn into fuel, like me reducing my hours now. I'm part-time rather than full-time. My kidney went quite poorly last year after loads of different bladder, stone and sediment problems. I was very, very poorly. I actually had to come out of work completely for a couple of months. So I couldn't turn that pain into fuel, if you like, at that point. That body was saying stop. You know, you're too unwell at the minute, and we've now reached like a fork in your road where, you know, your body's sort of thrown up another bit of a hiccup because it's an autoimmune condition. So as I get older, it will change and it will affect me in different ways and start to affect different parts of my body, not just my bladder. So I think it's sort of recognising that actually maybe I'm not 21-year-old Aoife now, I'm 30 and things have changed slightly for me and I might just need to adapt again for this change. You know, so sometimes, the pain and fuel thing, it can go one way, can't it, or the other way.
For sure, for sure. And I think what's really important to remember is that like it's not for everyone. Like you don't have to be a fighter if you don't want to be. Like if that's not in your makeup, that's not in your makeup. Don't feel bad about it. Like not every single disabled person wants to talk about disability. Some people do, some people don't. I just happen to be one of the people who freaking loves these conversations and also likes throwing my opinion out into the world every now and then. Like if it's not in your makeup, it's not in your makeup, and you should never feel bad for that.
No, totally, absolutely. I think as well, like listening to your body is so important, and listening to you know, staying true to yourself with what you believe. Do you know, I think that's been a big thing for me, and I've learned that through the hard way, because sometimes I've burnt the candle at both ends by trying to do like too much to prove a point, to prove I can do this, like you're all underestimating me, and I'm going to do it, you know, with bells on and make it even bigger than you thought. And sometimes that has worked in my you know, detriment, because I've ended up more poorly or something bad happened subsequently to that. So I've definitely learned that the hard way in life, that, you know, you need to sort of listen to you and your body and pay attention to that, really, because, you know, you're your longest commitment, aren't you? You've got to live with you forever. So you need to look after this house that you're living in, because it's really, it's really, really important.
Exactly. You're the longest relationship that you're going to have with yourself. Like that's the longest relationship you're going to have in your life, regardless of who is in and out of your life. You are the main one that's going to stay there forever.
Yes, that's it. Very true.
So I wonder, do you have a piece of advice for either and or probably both a younger version of yourself? So 16-year-old Aoife, do you have a piece of advice for her? But also a piece of advice for someone who's younger than you but has the same disability as you?
I think to 16-year-old Aoife, who thought her whole life was over at that point, especially that year that I had to take out a sixth form, which seems so small now in the journey of my life, but actually that was huge. It felt like I was like, I'm never going to be the same, and nothing, I won't achieve any of my goals. And I think telling her that actually you will achieve, and you'll achieve so much more than you maybe thought you would, and that this disability that you have been given with your bladder now, midway through your teens, actually it might be a bit of a gift or a blessing rather than a curse. yeah, it's going to make your life harder, but it's going to make you a better person, and you are still going to be able to achieve with that. So I think that's what I wish I could go back and sit next to me on the sofa when I was having my meltdown at the time and thinking, I'm never going to be able to get through any of this. I wish I could sit next to her and just put my arm around her and say, it's going to be okay. And, you know, you will have sustained relationships. And it was a big thing as well at that age, thinking like, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to tell like a future boyfriend that like I've got this tube that I can't see, and I've got this tube that hangs out my tummy. When I'm in underwear, you can so visibly see it, or bikinis, whatever.
Yeah.
How on earth am I ever going to tell that person that, you know, I'll maybe want to have a relationship with and be intimate with? How am I going to have this conversation? And I remember being so frightened of that. But a big thing for me in that realm as well is just sort of being as open and honest about everything with that person as you can. Because actually, the less you try and I don't know, be like, cover it up. Do you know what I mean? The more open you are about it, I think the more they're like, oh, well, she's well open about it. Like, it's not that weird, then it's not that much of a strange thing. It's fine. Because I'm there like, oh, well, it's just this tube and I just can't pee. And that's just, if it wasn't there, I wouldn't be here. And I think if you say it like that and own it, then they've got no choice but to own it too, because they mirror what you are, you know, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really important thing that you said about being really open. So I know a lot of people who have not necessarily hidden their disability, but not necessarily made it super obvious that they do have a disability, whether it's on dating profiles or, you know, in their workplace. And then all of a sudden people are finding out and they're like, what? Like, what? What? And I can only imagine that being a really awkward conversation, because if I met someone and then all of a sudden, like 3 weeks later, they've got a disability that they didn't have before, I'd be like, oh, okay, like, but like, explain why you just didn't tell me in the first place. Like, that would have been so fine. And like, I make it very, very obvious that I'm disabled. Like, it's everywhere. You can't really Google me without knowing that I'm not disabled, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm completely with you in that. I think as soon as you're able to own it and be super open about it, I think it's only ever going to serve you in your best interest, because it's a part of you. Like, disability is a part of your life. It's part of your life. It's part of my life. Probably if you listen to this podcast, it's part of your life as well. So the sooner that you can be able to be like, do you know what? Yeah, I am disabled, but actually it's completely normal and we're all freaks. Like, every single one of us, we all have our own things that make us tick, and you know, disability just happens to be one of mine.
Yes, definitely. And I just think then it normalizes it for the other person, doesn't it, so much more? Because you know, we've got to give credit to like people that we meet in our life that this isn't normal for them. It might be normal for me with a tube, it might be normal for you to get through life the way you do you know, but like, actually it's not normal for them. So it is quite normal for them to act like, oh, this is a bit strange, and that's okay. Because it's a bit strange. They might not have seen that before.
I always forget, and I've said this before, and I will say it again 100 times over, but I always forget that disability isn't the norm. Like, I consistently forget that it's not. Like, when I go out and I'm talking like with friends and stuff, I'm like, oh, like, right, like, disabilities are my thing. Like, it's not necessarily like an everyone thing. Whereas in my head, it's an everyone thing.
Yeah. That's it. We forget that. And I think as well, sort of, you know, you were saying there about advice to my 16-year-old self, but also advice to someone in their teens, maybe, or early 20s or whatever, kind of, or even childhood, going through a big bladder dysfunction like this, that actually there are other people out there. And like, when I was 16, there was no one. I was on wards with like 90-year-old women, because a lot of bladder stuff affects older women, and they were lovely and they were so sweet and looked after me when I was first sort of going through all my, you know, testing. And I'd end up with that big UTI infections and things on wards on IV antibiotics and that kind of stuff, because the nature of living with catheters, no matter what type of catheter you have, you end up with infections quite a lot. So a lot of them need to be treated with IV treatment. So I'd end up on wards with older women who were all lovely, but there kind of wasn't this like chronic illness community online then. There wasn't really even Instagram. It was maybe, or if there was, it was just in its infancy. There was a bit of MySpace and a bit of maybe Facebook, but that was it. And no one was really talking about illness the way they do now. And
Yeah.
I think I read somewhere, like, is it 1 in 2 of us can become part of the chronic illness club at any point in our life? Like, you could be struck down by a chronic illness, whether that's sort of externally or internally or whatever, at any point. So
Yeah.
I think my advice to somebody younger going through it now would be reach out and search for your tribe, because there are people out there now. And just be very selective, like who you pick, because sometimes I was added into Facebook groups in my early 20s that were just a little bit toxic. It was almost like no one was sharing about when things go good.
Yeah.
Everyone was sharing about bad. And I found that too much had to come out of groups like that. So just be very like mindful, I guess, if anyone's watching this, of sort of, you know, who you follow, who you add, who you listen to, because there are so many people, you included, Brooke, that talk about all the I cans, not just the I can'ts.
Yeah.
And I think that is so important, because me as a young person, I'd want to see, well, can I still work with this? Can I still go on holiday with this? What does it look like if I'm wearing a bikini and I've got a tube bag? You know, oh gosh, like, do they make swimwear for me? Where would I go shopping for swimwear? Relationships, what's your advice with that? You know, there's so many everyday things that I think people talk about and highlight in a positive way, rather than always focusing on the negative. Still speaking about their lived truth, and I do have to speak about the negatives at times, but the whole thing is about sharing all the things I can do whilst living with this. So I think, big piece of advice to anyone younger and listening, that you know, just be selective who you look at and who you follow.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece of advice. And the reason I think it's so important as well, like, all of your points are absolutely bang on. But what I also notice sometimes particularly in the disabled community, is that there's a lot of people who are heavy on the inspiration porn, which is great, like amazing that we can do all these things. But if you are making someone feel bad because they can't and they are able, as in like they are non-disabled, that's when there's a problem. So I completely agree with exactly what you're saying. Really be selective with who you're following, and make sure it's all for the right reasons as well. And also maybe just like educate yourself a bit in disability. Like, it's quite a lot of history there that we were never taught. There's a lot of stuff on the internet. Find some leaders, and like good ones, and like have a little bit of a deep dive. Like, it's a whole pool. It's really interesting. Crack on.
yeah, absolutely. And isn't it great that there is that kind of community out there now? Because when we were younger, that there wouldn't have been. We wouldn't have had anyone to.
No, exactly that.
You
Social
know,
media has come so far in terms of representation, because you can now find people who are just like you, particularly surrounding disability and chronic illness. You can find those communities, and you can find the people that are gonna empathize and understand way more than those who aren't going through what you're going through. You know, So I completely agree with you. I think social media, as much as we know it's a beast, we need to know how to be able to tame the beast and make sure that you're using it in the best way possible.
Yeah, because it definitely has its positives. I mean, like you said, there are plenty of negatives about it. I see it even being a school teacher now, of like upper key stage 2. I see so many things. I think, oh, kids, like, you know, once you've typed something online about someone or about anything, it's there forever. And if you delete it, someone might have screenshot it, or it's there as a footprint, isn't it? You know, like a online. So trying to educate kids with it, I'm like, oh my gosh. So I totally understand that. That, you know, it's got many negatives, but actually I try really hard to see it for all its positives too, because I mean, I'm awaiting a stoma surgery to remove my bladder. It was meant to be last October, but there's been so much with the NHS and things going on, things being pushed back and whatever else. And in the interim, I've managed to do so much more work on knowing what a stoma looks like, talking to people with a urostomy rather than just a colostomy for bowel, a urostomy for bladder. How does that affect their everyday life? How regularly are they changing their bags? You know, top tips from them. Does the site get sore? Have they had many site infections? How do I manage that? All these type of things that I think, well, actually, I'm now so much better prepared for my surgery because of social media.
Exactly
I've done more through connecting with others than my actual urology nurses are able to do for me, because they don't live with a stoma. They can show me the bag and they can talk me through what it will look like, and they can talk me through post-surgery life. but they can't actually like tell me firsthand. And social media has allowed me to do that, which is amazing.
That's the power of it, isn't it? Right there is that you now feel more prepared for something that beforehand you wouldn't have necessarily had access to first person experience. And like, isn't that amazing?
Yeah,
like
totally, absolutely.
So I ask everybody. I have a feeling some of these questions are going to send me over the edge. I ask everybody about the weird questions that they get, because as disabled people we can get very bizarre questions. Sometimes it's daily, sometimes people don't. Sometimes people don't get bizarre questions. But I was wondering, is there a particular set of questions, or is there one question that comes to mind that when you first heard it, you either laughed or you were just like, where did that come from?
No, I don't get that many weird questions. I guess I get questions around intimacy quite a lot. Like, can you still, be intimate with your partner with that? Like, how does that work? How does that, what that look like? Because you've obviously got a tube literally hanging out of your stomach, which you have to tuck into your knickers or tape to your thigh. So like, what are the logistics of that? How's that, what's that look like? I get that quite a lot online from like, women sort of who've been fitted with a catheter, and that is totally legit. Like, that is such a good question. How does that work? So I guess that's a question that I always find like, oh God, I've got to go through that again with someone, which again is totally fine. I don't mind explaining it one-to-one to somebody, but yeah, so that's not necessarily a weird question, but it's a bit of like a question. And no, I get sometimes like, can you still poo? And I'm like, yeah, it's only my bladder. Completely different part of the body. Yeah, that's probably about it, really. Some people sort of just being a bit naive about their anatomy, but you know what? I get that, because like, I only know quite a lot about my abdominal anatomy now because I've had to, so I've had no choice but to sort of learn how it all works and what interconnects with what doesn't, all the rest of it. So I kind of get that people do come up with questions that you probably think, oh, for God's sake, that's so like, duh, of course your bladder and your bowel aren't linked. But maybe, I guess, if someone's not really given that much thought and looked into it, then they wouldn't know.
And that's such a great way of looking at it, isn't it? That sometimes people just don't know because they just don't know. Like, we're not all Einstein. I only have one final question for you, and I know the answer already, it's fine, but I ask it anyway, and that is, are you disabled and proud?
I absolutely am. I am disabled and proud, absolutely. I just think it's amazing what gifts you get given from having this, actually, from having something that doesn't work properly or doesn't work as it's meant to. I'm just like, I'm so pleased that I can make the most of what I've, what's wrong, and actually prove to others that there are so much more to people with a disability than they would ever realise. So I'm really, really proud to be a part of the community that does that, because you as well, Brooke, your whole thing as well is about showing what you can do and actually living a normal life with all of this going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think, and I think about this quite a lot, and I know I've just said I think about 3 different times, but we'll get over that. There is so much fight and power behind disability. And when you think about disabled history, there is so much fighting and so many people who have come before us who have fought to get what we have, that actually it's an insult if we aren't proud of being disabled at this point in time. Like, we have come so far, and there's still a really long way to go, don't get me wrong, we still have absolutely loads of barriers to smash, but at this point in time we should be proud of being disabled people, because so many people have like put their lives on the line for us, and that's incredible.
Yeah, totally agree. It's a little bit like that whole like women vote thing, right? My friend, she's always like, oh, I forgot to vote. She's like, not interested in politics at all. And I wouldn't say I am hugely either, but my mum's always been like, Aoife, women fought for us to vote, you've got to get in and do your vote and do a bit of research before you go and vote and all the rest of it. So I do think that it's a little bit like that, isn't it, with being disabled. Actually, there's so many people that have fought before us.
Exactly. I've loved this. I've learned so much. Honestly, it's been so great. Like, thank you again for giving up your time to come on the podcast today. I've loved it. And
you're so welcome. I've had such a great morning. It's been lovely. Thank you so much.
oh, thank you so much. Well, yeah, thanks for coming on. And I'm sure we'll do a part 2 at some point soon, because after you've had your operation, I want to know how it all works. But it's been so great having you on, and it's been wonderful to chat. And like, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, and we'll chat again soon.
Yes, we will. Speak soon.